Hello, everyone. I hope this is finding you well and ready for Module 4. So, we've had a chance to kind of explore our own values and take a look at the things that are really important to us. And also, with the activity the past week, really look at and compare, the values that are important to the profession and the values that are important to us. If you're like me, and I did this exercise too along with you, so I could kind of experience what you all were experiencing too. It was more along the lines for me anyway to pick out where I aligned, where my personal and professional values aligned well with the ACA codes in particular. I spoke to this a little bit earlier in some of my videos, but I I really do hold a pretty strong alliance with the promotion of social justice for that the ACA has adopted in their 2014 code. And so, each one of us are informed in our own values by several things. It can be our culture, can be our family, can be just something internal to us. It can be a lot of people, it's their religion and their spirituality. And it can be a combination of those things too. And so being really firmly rooted and aware of your own values and where they come from is very important for this class. So there's been a lot of self-reflection so far. So I do want you to take particular note when you read through other people's, and you might see where your own values maybe are not consistent. And also, those folks that they look very familiar and very similar. So I think that's important to reflect on both of those and validate each one. So without further ado, let me get into our lecture for this week. Let me see if I can pull that up for us and get this out of the way because we can't see with that there. Okay, and so pulling this up and getting our modules together. Here's module 4 ready to go. So here's what we have posted for our lecture this week. So I'll try to scan through this pretty quickly. So here are our assigned readings. I'm not going to give you a summary. I'm going to ask that you go through those, yourselves and take a look at the chapter in our textbook, some of these other supplemental readings. The one thing that you'll notice here with Levitt and Moorhead and then Frame and Williams and then the steps, we're really focused this week on how to come about with, an ethically sound decision. So a lot of research has gone into how counselors make ethical decisions. And a lot of the research is a little disconcerting. This goes a little bit into my dissertation. There have been several studies that find that even though we kind of talk about ethical decision-making models, and that's what we're specifically covering this week as far as our content here for lecture, even though we really promote these ethical decision models in counselor education, in actual practice, people are way more likely to just use their own values, to just kind of navigate from their own lenses. And so you can see then the necessity and why we want people to really kind of get in touch with their own values, because a lot of the research suggests that people don't use these. We're going to talk about the fallacy of that here in a moment. And there are a lot of ethical decision-making models out there. So lecture outline, model for ethical decision-making. So your textbook includes one. Let me see if I can pull, I'm not going to pull that up. You can see those in the book where we highlight the pages 14 through 17 talks about some of the different models that are out there. And so we want counselors to rely upon a model because it will help guide you through some really tricky situations and some ethically ambiguous situations. So, it's pretty easy to know, do no harm, the non-maleficence, and, oh, by the way, don't have sex with your clients. Those are some givens that you walk into this class with that, yeah, okay, I pretty much know, yeah, you can't be a counselor to seduce people. So, but once you jump in, and if you looked at all of your codes, if you looked at the school counseling codes, the ACA codes, those can be pretty overwhelming. There are a lot of different codes out there. So don't feel badly if you're like, oh my gosh, I can never memorize all this. And so knowing that people aren't necessarily going to memorize those, we go through these models to help people decide, ethically, their right decisions. And so, when I went through school in the early 2000s, they didn't really promote this with me. And I wish they would have. I've had several, in those early years as a counselor, had several situations where, I'm kind of just consulting with colleagues and trying to, come up with the right decisions in my own mind. And these ethical models will help you at least structurally provide a way that, and something that you can lean on, particularly for really sensitive situations. There are a lot of models out there. I've included a few. Your textbook talks about a few. I gave one that's pretty common. And so I would suggest that you, take a look at the ones that are out there. And so this Frame Williams talks about ethical decision-making from a multicultural perspective. I encourage you to read through that. I think that's an important model. It goes into a little different framework versus the Forrester Miller Davis, which has been promoted by the ACA pretty heavily. And I included that up there in your outline. And then the steps, the ethical decision-making model for school counselors. So those of you that are in school counseling, please, you'll want to look through this and maybe compare for similarities in some of these other ethical decision-making models. And so what we end up with then is hopefully a framework and some guidance in making decisions. Let me go back to the module here, show you what's in there. So here's actually your discussion board. It doesn't necessarily directly relate to the lecture this week. However, I will say that I'm going to be contacting you this week, most likely Wednesday, for your group assignments. I've had a chance to randomly assign people into groups. And so I'll be giving folks their ethical dilemma that they'll want to work through. And so you'll want to, as a group, decide on one of these models to help you work through your ethical dilemmas, your ethical situations that you'll be presented with. And so you don't have to necessarily choose these. You can step out and choose others as well. So there is the Forrester Miller Davis ethical decision model. And again, you can see this is promoted by the ACA. It's been out there for a long time now. They started really the EDDM movement, ethical decision models, in the 90s. So you've seen a lot, and here's one that's a quick poster. So if you want to just print this and kind of keep this by your side, again, it's off of Forrester Miller Davis. So it just takes you through steps of making decision. Why this is important is if you're ever questioned, if you're ever brought to a lawsuit, God forbid, or just forbid that from happening, that somebody takes you what you've done in a bad way, or maybe you've been in a gray area and you made one choice. It's very important to document and rely upon one of these models, because you can find yourself in hot water if you just off the top of your head make a decision. And sometimes it's pretty difficult, because we're put in situations on the spot, in session. Okay, what am I going to do here? I've got this confidentiality issue, or I've got this other issue, or I know this. Should I, what should I do? So sometimes we can't always necessarily step back, use the model, and consult. So that's what this class is for. It's to go over these issues prior to actually getting into the field and counseling. So take a look at the models. Consider, the lecture. Please read through the lecture. I added a few different things in the lecture notes that I didn't talk about here. And also be aware that probably Wednesday or Thursday, I'm going to reach out. And so if it seems like the discussion board, gosh, what am I going to talk about? Part of this week, you're going to be reaching out to your group members, which you'll find out soon enough who those will be, and trying to coordinate your projects, your paper, and then your presentation. So that's the big assignment for this class. And so we're going to jump into that. So it's a little bit, go ahead and do your best on the discussion board, but be aware that there'll be a lot of coordination towards the end of the week. I may even consider waiving that one of our posts, just because of what you're going to be required to do. So, but I'll send out instructions on that later in the week. There'll be a new little place on the, and you may have noticed it here if I can share my screen again without wasting too much of our precious time. Let's see here. There will be an ability for me to move. You notice I've got this groups tab over here on the left. I'm going to try to give you some resources under that tab where you can use videos to reach out to each other. You'll also have access to your the actual case scenarios that because you're going to get a vignette. You're going to get a case scenario, and then apply between all of you, the code of ethics to try to figure it out. So anyway, hopefully this was helpful. And if you have any questions, as always, reach out, and I'll do my best to respond. Have a good week. See ya.